Hello everyone.
Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. Guten Tag.
Good morning.
Bonjour.
Labrit.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eleni Kouri, and we are from Cyprus.
Dear members of the European Parliament, fellow students.
Dear students of Europe, we are Ilse and Yusra. We are here to represent our country, the Netherlands.
Ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Samuel.
And my name is Lenka, and we come from Slovakia.
Hello to the youth of Europe, to the people that will help build a strong, united and peaceful Europe for all of us.
First of all, I'd like to say how truly grateful we are for the opportunity to participate in such an educational event here in the European Parliament.
Hopefully, our work today will contribute to a better future for each and every one of us and for every European citizen. And who knows, maybe today will be the beginning of many new lifelong friendships.
Repülj, madár, repülj, menasságra repülj, édes galambomnak gyenge vállára ülj. Vidd el, madár, vidd el, levelemet vidd el, apámnak, sanyámnak, jegybéli mátkámnak.
As we all know, Trump has recently been elected in the States. And one of his questionable sayings is that he's going to cancel the participation of the states in the COP21 and the Paris Agreement. So my question is, have there been any discussions in the European Parliament about what's going to happen if the President of the United States does this? And is it possible for a country like the States to cancel it? And what is the Parliament going to do regarding that?
We were told earlier that the European Union was doing everything in its power to resolve the issue of climate change, but the ECB recently decided to earmark 1,000 billion towards financial speculation in the market. So why couldn't that money go to the EIB, so the European Investment Bank, which could then be lent out at a rate of 1% interest to be invested in useful projects, and particularly to help out countries in difficulty, Greece and others notably?
I would like to share my concern as a member of Cyprus and the whole Mediterranean Sea, Italy, Greece, and especially the concerns of our Greek brothers according to the migration crisis. What are the policies of the European Union on this matter?
And experts are projecting the economical crisis in 2018, and this is a result of recent events in the world, for example, election of Trump or Brexit. So what could be EP actions regarding this issue?
Well, Europe does not have the necessary powers to legislate in certain areas, such as education, since the powers of Europe have grown steadily since its inception. Would it not be a good idea for its powers to be extended? So how is the European Union going to develop further? Because you've got the rules that apply right now. Actually difficult to apply. I mean, just look at the Maastricht criteria to give you one example. You've got a huge number of countries who infringe those rules every year. And at the end of the day, no sanctions are applied. So how's the European Union going to develop further if no sanctions are applied when they fail to abide by European rules? I mean, what is the thinking behind that?
In 2009, the European Union faced a really grave crisis, which left the economy of some of its member states, such as my country, Greece, devastated. The problems of those crises of those countries mainly come as a result of chronic, bad and irresponsible handling on the part of national governments. So, what decisions and regulations have already been adopted or are going to be proposed by European institutions in order to avoid that inefficient economic policies will be implemented by governments in the future.
Has the European Parliament ever considered, or were there any discussions about completely removing the emissions trading system?
You've been talking about approval of the CETA agreement. So my question relates to TTIP, the treaty being negotiated with the USA. Now, I know that there's been a lot of protests, popular protests. A lot of people are against TTIP. And yet we, at the same time, are being inundated with information as to the advantages that TTIP represents for Europe, but I think citizens continue to be opposed to it.
What is your view about the fact that the recent negotiations for the Cypriot situation have failed?
I personally feel a little bit insecure. Turkish authorities states which refer directly to Greece are irrational. Terrorist attacks become more and more frequently. All these factors threaten security and stability. Should be worried. What are European Union's actions in order to retain the global balance? Thank you.
Firstly, on the English language and its use as the official language of the EU post-Brexit. Because if I'm not mistaken, there's no other country, member state within the EU that uses English as an official language. So my question is, do you think that the use of English could be limited? And my second question concerns Marine Le Pen and her announcement that were she to become president of the French Republic, her intention is to leave NATO, if not the EU. Or to revert to the franc and abandon the euro. So I'd like to ask you whether that should be taken seriously, these threats, or is it rather like Donald Trump, who of course changes position as soon as he's elected, because that could happen with Marine Le Pen?
As we all know, there are countries all around Syria whose borders are closed off from these refugees. And this is a ginormous wave of people who are coming to the European Union. And my question is, have there been any negotiations with these countries around Syria for them to take in some of these refugees, to take up some of the load?
We would like to start with more strict supervision when it comes to fulfilling aims set by the Paris Agreement and the European Commission. Secondly, we would like to introduce the local improvement of public transportation, such as railways and buses, in order to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Another important aspect is the investment in eco-friendly architectural projects on a larger scale in Europe, such as rooftop gardens, which contribute to the improvement of air quality. Also, we strongly believe that the European Union should financially support smaller countries in order to achieve the goals our community has set in a shorter amount of time. Another thing we consider important is investing in educational programs in schools and universities that promote an eco-friendly attitude, because it is crucial to keep young people engaged and informed when it comes to global warming. Last but not least, we believe that the European Union should provide more financial support for research in order to make renewable sources of energy more efficient and to store the energy easier. In conclusion, I would like to point out that if we stick to those 6 points, the plan is going to be a lot easier to achieve and people are going to be able in a better atmosphere with better quality of life. Thank you.
I just want to know about these roof gardens and the role that they're going to play. I mean, I think that was something that you suggested. And what is the European Union going to do to force people to build flat roofs in order to put gardens on them? How are you going to do that? Well, it's not a duty. People are not going to be forced to do it, not an obligation, but it's important that people feel more committed. And actually, there might be projects which would be directed towards getting people to show an interest in such things. And if you have devised such a project and you've got it up and running, then you might get financial support from the European Union, something along those lines.
We see human rights as one of the core principles of EU, and as such, this topic is delicate and of the utmost importance. We have come up to some conclusions. The first one being of what should be done if an European Union member state breaches human rights principles. We have two conclusions here. First one being that the European Union and European Parliament should make strong economic sanctions on countries who, after breaking human rights principles, do nothing for fixing it. And the second one being suspending member states who breach core human rights principles like restricting freedom of expression or selling personal data without the consent of people. Moving on, if we voted on if Europe should restrict freedom of expression where the security is at risk. And we came up with the conclusion that keeping in mind that freedom of expression is one of the base rules of democracy, we can't restrict it. Moreover, as European Union, we need to promote respect between people by improving education of religious and nationalities to promote this respect between people, thus lessening the security risk made by disrespect and unfit humor.
A while ago you said the freedom of human speech is a thing, but you want to guideline it. But isn't that kind of a contradiction in yourself? And as well, you also said education could fix the problem. How could education fix the problem? No matter how smart, no matter how stupid you are, you can get offended really easily. And no matter what you say, due to religions, you will always try and find a comeback to hurt that person. So I'm just kind of saying, how would you fix it with guidelines without restricting human speech?
Thank you for the question. And firstly, I would like to remind you that we would put guidelines on what is appropriate and what is actually gets offensive. And we already have these guidelines in all member states. There is no discrimination against anyone, and we would put more focus on this and more focus on detecting if there is discrimination in the society. And your question about how would education fix the problem, it will improve the problem in general, and it will improve the society's view on other people who are different than, for example, if I live in Latvia, we are mostly white people. And so if the education will learn more about diversities in nations and diversities in races, then the society would become more accepting of other people, and it would improve the problem. It may not fix the problem entirely, but it will improve. And that is the step we absolutely need to take. Thank you.
In our opinion, we should support more countries which are in Europe and which could someday become part of the European Union, and countries from which we can benefit politically and then economically. This is really important because in this way we will have stronger economic partners. This will also lead to less immigrants, because in Europe we have a problem where, for example, people from the Balkans, they immigrate to Western countries. And by providing these people with economical support, then they can have jobs and they can stay and develop their own countries. But again, I'd like to say at the end that this does not mean that we'll stop supporting third world countries. We'll also support them, but after all, the European Union is not a charity. And the UN is the institution which supports such countries. And of course, we will continue to try to reach the UN 2020 Sustainable Development Goals, but we should also think about ourselves and about our political and economical future. Thank you.
I was thinking about the second point about investing in countries of Europe that are not inside the EU yet. And I was wondering, how would you choose what countries you were going to invest in?
Well, in Europe, there are obviously countries which are more poor than others. For example, new countries like Kosovo, Albania. These are countries which really need it. And also, I think that we should give money to countries which aspire someday to be EU members, more aid. And this way, we can just fasten the process of them covering all of the goals which they have to achieve in order to become a member. And in this way, we can someday in the near future probably achieve the primary goal of the European Union to have a fully united Europe. Thank you.
Education must be prioritized and fees must be reduced so people can study abroad, as you get to meet other cultures and get to know different countries in the EU. We also decided that it should be easier to enter higher education. For example, the more education, the more we can be involved and have ideas on the future of Europe. Because as I remember, there was this goal that they were introduced a program that they could learn about the EU. And it was the first time it was tried, and it was also the last time. And not everyone got to actually experience this program. And so if we want to raise awareness for Europe, we must do it through different programs such as Euroscola and the EYP. We said that we want a stronger, united Europe, and we can develop this thing through getting to know different cultures, as I said before, through different programs, because as we all know, we're not really united actually, and we've got different problems, and this is why maybe the UK is leaving the EU.
And I'd like to make a note regarding the higher education. We have the situation here in Lithuania that higher education is a bit too accessible for everybody, meaning that the quality of studies actually drops, since not everybody who is capable are actually accepted into universities. Don't you think that would cause this particular problem in the entire EU as well as the drop of quality of studies? Thank you.
Well, basically, when we said about higher education, it can be compulsory, so people that believe that they're capable of adapting to the higher education, it's unfair if they are not given the opportunity to actually experience such things, because as I said, the girl that had the opportunity to take part in the certain program said it's a shame because not everyone gets to experience, and there were certain people that got the chance. So there were actually other people that wanted to experience the same thing, but they weren't given the opportunity. So I believe that there should be a certain course, or let's say, it should be compulsory basically for them. And if they are capable of adapting to such education, then why not? It's unfair to the others that actually want and can't.
We need to educate both locals and in the receiving countries and immigrants so that locals would see them as humans, not terrorists, and immigrants would get a sense of the values we have and at least try to understand our ways and try not to destroy our countries. So there was an example that we could make schools for immigrant children that would be only for immigrant children, and sometimes they could work together with the local schools, where are the local children, therefore slowly integrating the immigrant children to the values of the named country. And the third, but not least, was that we could send the immigrants to the countries which have fewer people who work, so that the immigrants and the countries would benefit. To be more precise, immigrants would have high chance to get a job, therefore provide for their families that they would take with them, but locals would have people who work in the work state that don't have the working people. So thank you.
Wouldn't schools only for immigrants who'd from time to time meet with local children
Won't it make them even more isolated? What does it have to do with actually integrating the new population with the old one?
Well, you can't just make a child who has learned different culture, different values, different language, you can't just drop him in another country and say, just learn in that school. So therefore, we could make a school for just immigrant children, and therefore they could slowly, like few times a month, and therefore more frequently work with people, with children from other schools, local schools, and therefore they would be integrated into that society slowly, so they could start to understand the values we have, and there would be no arguments about it.
The first thing that we discussed in our group was creating more similar school systems all over the European Union. So if young people wanted to study or work in another country, it would be easier for both sides to know where we stand. If the knowledge after education is the same level in all countries of European Union, there will be no misunderstanding of the standards that are needed for a job or certain school. The point that caused a great discussion in our group was what happens with the countries in which the people would be only leaving and not coming to the country. And our final conclusion was that this would be probably evened out as time passes. Another problem that we bumped on were cultures and what will happen to them. We certainly don't want to erase the cultures. The history and the celebrations of each and every culture will still stay the same. The next point that we discussed were internships while studying. We recommended a time frame in the school year that is meant for students to work somewhere, get experience, and also get a small salary. In return, the companies would have lower income taxes, or they would get an emblem for charity, so it would be worth doing it for them. And the students will be rewarded with experience and connections for later on. And the last thing that we discussed was that the business itself would train you for a position that you are applying for with no earlier education of your own. Thank you.
You said that European countries should have a similar educational system. This might be beneficial for employment, but it might hurt multiculturalism, value of the EU, a core value of the EU. Is that a different? We maybe have to find another way to enhance youth employment without threatening this characteristic. Thank you.
So as I said, in our group, this was a great discussion. Actually, we came to the point that we said that the basic curriculum would be similar in all countries. So, for example, your native language, English, and, for example, math, would be in the end of your school in the same level. Because now we have differences in that point, not in your own language.